Dear my friends, it's my honor to have you here again. Today I'm continuing the second chapter of the book written by Patsy Lightbown and Nina Spada, How Languages Are Learned. This is very important, and I do believe the previous video as well, you benefited a lot from the video, and I hope that you will share with your colleagues and students as well. Okay, let's continue now with the chapter 2 of the book. Contrastive analysis, this is very important. And contrastive analysis of the differences between the L1 and L2. That's what we say linguistic parameters of the language or linguistic property of the language. That's always makes a drawback while learning, acquiring a language, because the linguistic property of an Uzbek language completely differs with the linguistic property of an English language. As a good English teacher, or as a good foreign language teacher, you cannot be very successful unless you know the differences, and it will minimize the time to explain to your students how they will make mistakes or where they will make a mistake. So you can predict in advance what type of mistakes could be done by your students. Okay, and there are, we call it language transfer or error transfer. So sometimes learners, they think that the linguistic properties of a foreign language is designed accordingly to their L1. So that's why they're transferring all the encyclopedic knowledge about the language to L2. That's how sometimes we face the problems. That's what we say transfer errors as well. So there are some limitations. So over-predicted errors, under-predicted errors, and etc. So we are going to see them exactly in the coming slides as well. The error analysis, analyzing second language learners' errors rather than predicting the errors they might make. So this is very important, or corrective feedback. Sometimes due to the limited time or due to the external factors, the language teachers or educators may not contribute the time for correcting the errors, analyzing the errors, because we call it, as Russian said, noticing hypothesis. Learners should notice what type of errors they are committing. Otherwise, they will continue generating different type of errors. Start with the errors that learners make and try to understand them. So usually that's what I said, transferring errors from L1 into L2. So like the Russian speakers, due to the gender differences, or Spanish and French due to the articles, English as well, they may have similar problems in L2 because they are transferring the knowledge of L1 into L2. Right, and this guy, Larry Salinker, the famous American linguist, applied linguist, in 1972, he coined the following two terminologies. It's a fossilization and interlanguage. So we have a Larry Salinker and Susan Gass, both of them from Michigan State University. And Larry Salinker, he's an emeritus professor right now, and Susan Gass still, she's running her projects and still she's conducting lectures at Michigan State University. And both of them, they are co-authors of a very brilliant book, Second Language Acquisition. I really recommend you to read the book. And they were the plenary speakers of my first conference in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we had a very nice time. So Larry Salinker and Susan Gass. So fossilization means when the foreign language learners, they generate the grammatical rules thinking that it's completely correct in that foreign language. So they are type of the making a lot of grammar rules by their own, assuming they are correctly following the grammatical rules of a foreign language, so fossilization. So as far as they will stay in a fossilization gray area, so it will take such a time to leave that territory. That's why it's very important. I really recommend to all foreign language teachers to notice errors the learners are doing and trying to help them to leave the fossilization. Otherwise, if they will stay in a fossilization period like for 2 years, it may take almost for 2 years for them, to recorrect their foreign language competence. Yes. Interlanguage error types. So we have interlanguage also, it's the coined terminology by Larry Selinker. So he's the author actually, interlanguage and fossilization theory. So we have a developmental or intralingual errors, which reflect understanding of an L2 system. And we have interlingual errors based on cross-linguistic influence. So let's talk about developmental errors. We have 5 sentences, and now I'm going to show you how most of the learners, they will make a mistake. So you may actually predict so while you are making a longitudinal method throughout the year, so for the next coming year, you may predict actually what type of errors your learners will do. Okay, she looking around, she runs to escape. Yesterday, he played soccer. Why you don't like cheese? The dog ran fastly. Do you think something is strange here? Yes, it is strange, right? So we have, it's not a native like English. Even though I understood, the content of a sentence, but grammatically, something is wrong. We have a high variety of a language and low variety of a language, a telegraphic speech, when you are omitting all the grammatical elements just to save the time and convey your message. Yeah, that's absolutely okay, right? Because in instant messaging, while communicating by WhatsApp or Telegram, that's what we're actually doing always, omitting all linguistic or grammatical elements, right? Okay. So think for a while, what's wrong here? Yeah, I know you found the mistakes, so let's do it together now. Okay, so look, she looking around, it's a developmental, it's a simplification we say, because simplification of the verb phrase by omitting auxiliary. So she is looking around, so learner omits is, thinking that the following verb looking actually inflects the pronoun she. So there is no need to use auxiliary. She runs to escape. It's overgeneralization, right? So there is a third person singular as, present marker to the past, right? So learner thinks that, yeah, I can use that as, singular as, always. So that's what we say overgeneralization. Yesterday he played. Again, it's a simplification, right? Because he thinks that once there is a beginning word, which is yesterday, so no need to inflect the verb with the past morpheme, which is ed, right? So no tense or number marker on the verb. That's what the learner thinks. Why you don't like, right? So that's what we say, learner, even though they are committing a mistake, but still they are progressing. So to reach the native-like accuracy, they need to jump from stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, stage 6, etc. As far as they will reach the native-like accuracy, that's what we say. The dog ran fastly. Again, we have here overgeneralization, adverbs added to the adjective. Right. Okay. Now we have a cross-linguistic influence, because in Uzbekistan, most of us, we do speak Uzbek, Russian, Kazakh, Karakalpak, Tajik, Turkmen, Kyrgyz, for example, right? So these are the languages widespread in Uzbekistan, or at the borders between Central Asian countries. Anyway, so which means that sometimes while constructing a sentence in English language or in a foreign language, L1 learners, they are transferring the linguistic property into L1, L2, and constructing a sentence. And sometimes they can have cross-linguistic errors as well. For example, in French language, literally they will say the boy kissed her mother. In Spanish, they say he no speak Spanish, la española. German speaker, they say like you ice cream. An Arabic speaker, the boy that I saw, he was running fast. So in those 4 languages, once you transform into those languages and write translation of a sentence, so it sounds correct, but it's not English-like, right? So let's see what's the problem. Yes. So the French possessive determinants agree with the object possessed. You see, the boy kissed her mother. Even it's the same in Russian. So he needs to say in English, the boy kissed what? His mother, right? But in French or in Russian, they will use her instead of his. And now we have the Spanish speaker. Spanish has no initial consonant cluster. That's why while even writing in English, they will say E-Spanish. German speaker. So now, as I told you in the previous slide, we have stages for request, for asking permission. So sometimes even to have a native-like accuracy to ask a permission, a learner should spend 1 or 2 or 3 months to reach this accuracy. And every time in each stage, they will make the mistakes. So the question formation learner hypothesized that the full verb can be inverted in questions. That's why he's using like you ice cream. An Arabic speaker, in relative clauses, Arabic doesn't delete the pronoun from its original place. So in English, you will remove it. The boy that I saw him was running fast. This is a typical Arabic linguistic property. Okay. Limitation of the error analysis doesn't take into account the element which is avoidance. That's we are going to elaborate on, and has no single focus. And it has only single focus, which is errors. That does not track changes in interlanguage that might reflect progress. That's what we say U-shaped development or development over a period of time. So that's actually the focus of the longitudinal method. So you are actually focusing within the semester how your learners are progressing. Okay, good. Performance analysis. So analysis of a learner's errors as well as the ability to do things correctly in order to come up with more comprehensive view of the learner's interlanguage and language use strategies. So performance analysis, for example, at the very initial point, they will bring you, for example, a learner will bring you A4 paper, the white A4 paper, and say, circle, which means, can you cut a circle for me, please? So, because it's a stage one word type, one word stage. Then they will use the 2 word stages. So, cut the circle. And then after a while, they will develop the strategies for asking for support or help. So it will take a time for them to develop these linguistic properties, to ask a permission with politeness, which is also its type of the pragmatic accessoires of a language. Good. Grammatical morphemes. So in every language, even in Uzbek, in Russian, in English, there are stages from the very easiest morpheme to the very complicated morpheme, or we have hierarchy of morphemes. Which morpheme learner will learn first? Which will come after? Which morpheme is very complicated and he will learn at the end? That's what we say hierarchy of morphemes. In L1 research, acquisition was seen as a mastery, so 90% of accuracy, and in L2 research, relative accuracy was compared. Let's see in the next slide. So L1 order, according to English learners, I mean the native English speakers, while they're learning the L1, so the present progressive ing, it's the most easiest, and this is the first grammatical element they will learn. An auxiliary be, like he is coming, this is the most complicated for them. I mean, while they're learning a native English language. But it's not the same morpheme order in L2 while they're learning L2. You see, I mean now, even though the ing, it's the most easiest, but here you may see it's the most complicated. And then the copula, an auxiliary, and etc. So this is the hierarchy of the L1 and L2 order of morphemes. Accessibility hierarchy. So, like the relative clause with the subject like that, that's the man. So, this is the most accessible for the learners, rather than the last sentence, object of comparison, he is the only man whom I'm taller than. So this one, it's less accessible. So learners, they are contributing a lot of efforts to learn this relative clause. So that's why analyzing errors and what type of errors they're committing, it's very important. Otherwise, you will yourself generalize about, yeah, he's not very good in English. English, with the 600,000 words of Shakespeare, or even up to 1 million, you can't say he's good or he's bad in English. You need to analyze, and you should categorize errors. So he is very good in English, but I think he needs to develop the article, or present progressive, or gerund, or all these elements of errors that I mentioned in my previous slides. Good. Reference to the past. At the very beginning, while learners, they are learning a language, learners with very limited language may simply refer to events in the order in which they occurred, or mention a time or place to show that the event occurred in the past. But the problem, you can see, they are not inflected with the past tense. My son come. He work in restaurant. So that's how they are describing event in an accurate occurrence. That's how they occurred, but without inflection. They think that once it's described by events, so it's inflected with the past tense. In a later stage, so while they're acquiring a very good command of English, learners start to attach grammatical morpheme. Now they're doing that, which shows that the verb is marked for the past. So now the people worked in the fields. So now they're inflecting the past tense with the ed. Even after they begin marking past tense on the verbs, learners may still make errors such as overgeneralization. So that's usually the popular error mechanism of young learners and plus later adult learners. So she rided her bicycle. So whatever verb they will see in the book or textbook or notebook, they will inflect with the past tense ed. Yes, learners are more likely to mark past tense on some verbs than on others. We call it stages within the stages. In Uzbek, it's very simple. It's very easy to inflect the past tense. Same in Russian. But in English, the foreign learners, it's very easy for them to mark the past tense to refer to completed events. For example, I broke the vase, or my sister fixed it with glue. So now these verbs, they are marked as a completed events. Good. But the verbs referring to states and activities, it's difficult for them to mark it. For example, she seemed happy last week. My father belonged to a club. So referring to state and activities. So that's why you should be aware that stages within the stages, even in the past verbs, they happen. So that's why you need to correctly analyze and diagnose, and also say to learners that we have stages within the stages. If they can concentrate, and you should help them, and they can overcome easily this process. Yes, movement through developmental sequences. So which means that the communication or communicative approach, or frequently using the language, it's really very beneficial, because each time they will use, they can come to higher stage. As I say, language accuracy. From the L1, they will reach the native-like accuracy. This is very important. So progress to a higher stage can result in a new errors, which means that he ran out of door followed by he ran out of the door. So which means that if they will commit a mistake like he ran out the door, so don't be type of sad or regret saying that, oh my God, I spent like a few months, still he is not progressing. But you should believe that we have this higher stage. They are obliged to make a mistake. So just encourage them to make a mistake. So mistakes actually shows what's the area of linguistics you should focus on more, working with your kids or with your students at university. Otherwise, you can analyze. I mean, you will think that, yeah, they are doing very good, but maybe they are cheating, they are copying, maybe it's a plagiarized, maybe they are just looking and transforming the examination sheet. And, you know, the students, they can do, sometimes they can do such a tricks or jokes. Yes. Good. Cross-linguistic influence. Cross-linguistic influence no longer referred to as a transfer or interference. Why? Because cross-linguistic influence can promote L2 development. Yes. So L2 can influence L1, which means that I mean, in a multilingual society, when frequently you are exposed to another language than your native language, for example, in Uzbekistan, we are very type of the multilingual. We have a multilingual competence, and sometimes we switch into different languages. So sometimes the L1 can influence our native language. Good. So vocabulary. English language is estimated to have between 100,000 and 1 million words. Yeah, as I mentioned in my previous slides, around 1 million. An everyday conversation requires about 2,000 words. So to have a very good, effective communication. A general academic vocabulary adds about 700 more. An educated speaker of English knows at least 20,000 words. That's what we say literacy. Learning new words. Vocabulary learning requires effort by learner and teacher. Stated by Paul Nation. Paul Nation is a very good friend of mine from New Zealand. And I think he has been to my conference as a plenary speaker back in 2012 and 2013. I can't remember the exact date. Anyway, in order to guess the meaning of a new word in context, one needs to know more than 90% of the words already in the text. So, a new phenomenon, isn't it? Up to now, we thought that, yeah, at least half of the language vocabulary range you should know, and then you can just predict what's the meaning of the next following word, even though you don't know the translation of that. But here, the Paul Nation says, no, at least 90%. Frequency makes a big difference in word learning. Words must be encountered many times to be firmly established in memory. You see, frequently the learner should use the words, the verbs to memorize and to keep for a longer period of time. Yes, interlanguage pragmatics, learning to use language appropriately. Yes, that's why mainly I tell that to have a very good score in IELTS doesn't mean that you can be very good in pragmatics or sociolinguistic perspective of a language. So language always embedded within the culture. So in order to be a very good native speaker, you need to live through the culture of that language. Even if learners have advanced grammatical and lexical knowledge in L2, they may not know how to apologize. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you can have a very wide repertoire of English language vocabulary, but still, I mean, sometimes we face those situations when students cannot make a very simple refuse or express disagree or recognize humor, etc. Good. Researchers have shown that these skills are also acquired developmentally. Yes. So frequently usage, and over a period of time, they can come to native-like accuracy. Yeah, pronunciation development. Learners need to perceive differences in sounds before they can produce them. We call it silent period, when they're passively listening, they have no self-confidence, no courage to speak, but they are passively receiving all the phonology. And then they will start to produce the content, communication, etc. Greater differences between the L1 and L2 can lead to greater pronunciation difficulties, like in Korean language. I used to live in Korea for 7 years. In Korean language, they don't have some of the letters that exist in English or in Uzbek. For example, F, R, Z, for example, and other letters. So that's why they will put a lot of efforts, I mean, to have a native-like pronunciation. Longer periods of exposure lead to improved pronunciation. Yeah. Frequently usage of English language, and then you will have a good accent. Adults who continue to make greater use of the L1 have stronger accent in L2. Yeah, which means that if even in Uzbek language you will have more exposure to your own native language, you can have a good accent in the future while learning a second language. Ethnic affiliation and identity choices also contribute to pronunciation development. Good. International regional varieties of English are appropriate goals for many learners. Yes. And for most learners, so I have a lot of friends, and due to the the trips to the other territories, rather than UK, like to Ireland, to New Zealand, to Australia, to Canada, so they picked up the local accent of English. For most learners, the goal is to be intelligible and communicatively competent, not to sound like a native speaker. So, you should be intelligible and competent by transferring your message. So, someone should receive your message and understand what idea goes in your mind. Instruction that focuses on suprasegmental rather than segmental has been found more effective for improving intelligibility. Sampling learner language, we call it corpus linguistics. So to predict or to reinforce or support any type of theory, always you should have this sampling learner language. You need to keep all these examination sheets and papers to analyze how they're progressing within the months. I think this is the end of the chapter 2. Yes, and I do believe you are also trying to generate your own theory that will be reinforced by the sampling learner language or documented language. So you will keep examination papers of your students, you will compare them, I mean you will see how developmental process going on, and you will see how they are recovering from fossilization or phenomena of interlanguage. It's all based on sampling learner language. Otherwise, you don't have such a very strong and long memory. I mean, to keep in your memory all developmental process. So a good language teacher is a good doctor. So you should put a right diagnosis on right time. Otherwise, they will be staying in fossilization for a longer period of time and having a very bad accent and non-comprehensible sentences as well. So, thank you very much. It was a pleasure for me to have the second chapter, and see you soon.